Hi, I'm Rob King. Welcome to my channel. This is Homebrew number 49. We're gonna go for a fruit sour, something I've never done before. Now the special ingredient in this recipe is the Philly sour yeast, which through fermentation generates lots of lactic acid. This is an orange and strawberry crush. Let's check it all out. Cheers. Fermentables are 2 kilograms of Euro pills, 1 kilogram of torrefied wheat, 750 grams of malted oats, 175 grams of acidulated malt, 200 grams of rice hulls, and then for the boil we also additionally have 200 grams of lactose. In secondary we are going to use 1.75 kilograms of strawberries, and we are going to substitute 1.5 kilograms of oranges with a litre of orange juice. Hops meanwhile are 5 grams of Magnum giving us 10 IBUs and 10 grams of Mosaic giving us 6 IBUs. Yeast meanwhile is the star attraction. This is going to be 1 packet of Wildbrew Philly Sour. Onto equipment. Now not all of the equipment on this list is absolutely essential, so I have flagged those optional items with an asterisk. However, in this recipe you will see the following items used. We have the bucket blaster for cleaning, but also used in the cooling stage as we will see in the recipe. Also kitchen scales, jeweler scales, thermometer, airlock and bung, a wine thief, some new clips to help me with that bucket blaster cleaning, hose control, a large spoon, a hydrometer and measuring cylinder, a pH meter, a refractometer, a chiller and associated hoses, and finally, of course, the Kegland Digiboil and Digimash system. The consumables then, starting with Chemsan sanitizer, some food grade grease. We also have PBW powdered brewery wash, lactic acid, a Wilbflock tablet for clarity, and finally some distilled water. Water then is 22.5 litres of Ashbeck water. Now the mineral content is on the side of the bottle, which lets me build up the high chlorine target chemistry that we are looking for. So to do that we're going to need 0.9 grams of baking soda, 2 grams of calcium chloride, 1.8 grams of canning salt, 0.7 grams of chalk, 0.3 grams of Epsom salt, and finally 0.3 grams of gypsum. I start preparations the night before, beginning with sanitization and cleaning of all equipment that's going to be used. I have a bucket blaster, which is a terrific little machine that blasts out and cleans the insides of any of the fermentation vessels. A manual shake, I'm going to leave this overnight and then empty it in the morning. We require 22.5 litres of mash water. Now as usual I'm using the Ashbeck water because of its low mineral content. I'll be using the bucket blaster for cooling tomorrow, so tonight I'm just filling it with water and putting it in the freezer. The strike temperature is 68 degrees. I'm setting this up ready for Alexa to switch on in the morning. It's the following morning, the water has heated up and we are going to add the water chemistry. This is a Philly sour chemistry which favours the chlorides 4:1. This is quite a high chloride ratio. Mash temperature is 65 degrees, so we can bring that temperature gauge down to 65 degrees and start to mash in. 2 kilograms of Euro pills, 1 kilogram of torrefied wheat. These are the rice hulls. 200 grams is a full bowl. We've still got 2 ingredients left to go. 175 grams of acidulated malt, 750 grams of malted oats. Right, I've given this a really good stir. Temperature is down to 66, so it'll be 65 very soon. This is thick. 15 minutes in, we check the pH. The pH has come out of 5.49, which is perfectly in range for what we were expecting. No further additions are going to be required. Mash is up. We're going to increase the power and raise the temperature to 77 degrees. Once we're there, we're going to hold it for 10 minutes to mash out. Of course, this is the perfect time to also take a reading for the pre-boil gravity. And it never hurts to give it a good stir to just maximise the amount of sugar that we get out of these grains. Mash out complete, we raise the temperature to a rolling boil. At some point I'm going to have to invest in a block and tackle to get the grain basket out at this stage. Easy. Rice hulls help terrifically with draining, so they're working well, but that doesn't stop me giving it a good old stir to make sure I maximise the amount of wort we get out of these grains. With all the liquid drained, moving the grains away is a much simpler task, thank goodness. At the start of the boil, we are planning to add 5 grams of Magnum hops and 200 grams of lactose. It is the boil. We are powering down to 500 watts for the rolling boil.
Okay, that's the break. So we start the boil. First hop addition is of course Magnum, 5 grams. 200 grams of lactose. So it's about 21 litres, just shy. Happy with that as a rolling boil.
Our gravity readings came in a bit chaotic for this homebrew. We have to reduce the temperature to room temperature before we take a reading. The refractometer came in at 1.050, the hydrometer at 1.053, all versus a target of 1.043. So at this point we were well over. pH meanwhile remained in the good range, 5.46. As we close in on the end of the boil, it's time to add the pump. By running the pump, it sterilises before we need to use it in the boiling wort. It also helps to create a nice whirlpool effect, which will pull any hop matter into the centre and also make sure we maintain a fairly even temperature. It's also time to add the chiller, which also sterilises in the boiling wort. 5 minutes from the end of the boil, we also add 10 grams of mosaic, giving us 6 IBUs, and 10 grams of Fermado, which is yeast nutrient, and finally a Whirlfloc tablet to aid clarity.
Rolling boil is okay, but it's reading 87 degrees. And it's time for cooling.
I'm going to initially connect up cooling to the tap water to start to bring that temperature down, giving me some time to set up my repurposed bucket blaster cooling system. I see. So this is the tap water I've retrieved from the freezer. It is a bit frozen up, but just enough to chip through to put the pump in. I'm connecting the outputs from the pump that would normally be the blaster part of the bucket blaster into the hoser lock for the chiller. This allows the chilled water to recycle through the chiller. A much more efficient process in terms of resources, but eventually what happens, the water starts to warm up and the chiller becomes less effective. However, I ran this for just long enough not to need to reconnect it to the tap water. For comparison today, the tap water was 11 degrees centigrade and the ice bucket started out at 7 degrees centigrade. Using the pump to recycle all of the wort, of course, also helps to maintain that cooler temperature. We are down to 26 degrees centigrade, perfectly where we need to be for pitching. We can now remove the chiller. I accidentally threw in the hops without the hop spider. Oops. However, the whirlpool will help pull all of that hop matter into the centre before we transfer. Transfer is pretty straightforward so long as I pay attention and I don't just spray it all over the floor. Oops. Also, the recommendation with the yeast was to just pitch it in midway through transfer, so that's what I'm doing. Splashing it all around aerates the wort and gives it lots of oxygen to help that yeast grow. I have a bit of a history with stuck lids and not being able to get in, hence I have greased the lid before I put in the airlock and bung. I have developed a bit of a complex over what PBW stands for. Now, this is amazing stuff for cleaning, and I do believe the official description is powdered brewery wash and not all the other words I've used in previous videos. And so our confounding, confusing gravity readings continue. At this point the OG should be reading 1.054, having gone up from 1.043 pre-boil, but in actual fact our readings have both gone down, so we have now gone to 1.046 on the refractometer and 1.050 on the hydrometer. It's only going to get worse. And I told you that PBW is fantastic. Look at this. Cleaning complete. It is the start of day one. The expectation is CO2 generation is low while it generates more lactic acid. Day two. By day 3 the bubbles have really slowed down, so it's time to sanitize all the equipment and get 1.75 kilograms of frozen strawberries out of the freezer ready to defrost for tomorrow. Day 4 and it is time to bring the strawberries and the orange juice together. Before adding to the fermenter I'm going to pulp the fruit, so adding the orange juice to the strawberries will help that process. We will extract the juice separately and then place all of the pulp into a hop bag to help aid with colour. Right, ready to go. We are going to take a gravity reading both before and after adding the fruit. That's a very cloudy light golden colour so far. Adding the juice and adding the pulp. Giving it all a good mix, it won't hurt to mix up some of that trub and activate some of that yeast. Less golden, perhaps a bit more orange in colour now. Taking our post-fruit addition gravity sample, and just to protect it from the air as much as I possibly can, I'm giving it a blast of CO2 before I put the lid on. The difference in pre and post fruit gravity readings was less significant than I imagined. Pre-fruit it was 1.021 with a pH of 3.46, and post-fruit it had only increased to 1.024 with a pH of 3.47. It's still day 4 and we are keeping this at room temperature. The aroma though is wonderful. Day 6 and we seem to have a reddish hue coming through in the colour. You can also see the trub dropping out at the bottom. Fermentation though is pretty slow. Slowly. Spring is here. It is day 14 and we're going to do a quick check on the gravity reading to see if it's time to move to cold crash. Now the gravity's come in at 1.012 against a target of 1.019, so that gravity is much lower than we were expecting. This could in part be due to when we added the fruit. Now if you add the fruit on day 2, then you're likely to produce more lactic acid and the final result will be more sour. However, if you add it on day 4, then you increase the level of attenuation, which is what we appear to have done here for a stronger end result. That colour still looks wonderful. Cold crash at this time of year is just a trip to the garage. It is day 18 and we are going to move 8 litres into the oxybar keg to keg carbonate, and then all the remainder into a bottling bucket and then into bottles to bottle carbonate. However, the first step as always is to thoroughly clean and sanitize all of the equipment, the oxybar keg, the bottles, the siphon, et al. Before we begin. Time to come in from the cold. Cold crash seems to have done its job. That is a solid layer of trub we have there at the bottom, and that beautiful orange colour is looking fantastic. The aroma is a little interesting. It does have a bit of an acrid smell to it. Is that normal? The first 8 litres are going into one of these wonderful oxybar kegs, and the remainder into the bottling bucket. That is definitely very orange. I think we've got as much as we possibly can out of the fermenter, and so it is time to clean all of the equipment. Here we go again. I can't help but be impressed by the sheer quantity of trub at the bottom of this one. Gosh. Thank goodness for the return of the bucket blaster to help with this cleanup. This was a fantastic little buy. And we have almost 9 litres in the bottling bucket. Wow! So we're going to just check the gravity again. I do not expect it to change, however it is good to do a final test. For bottle carbonation we have a few additions, starting with the priming sugar at 7 grams per litre. That is going to give us 63 grams of sugar into the bucket. Well, 64. Okay then. We are going to help bottle carbonation along by including a little of the CBC1 cask and bottle carbonation yeast. Now this only requires 0.1 grams per litre, so we're going to put 0.75 grams into the bottling bucket along with the priming sugar once we've mixed it all together with some warm water. I'm going to give it a little stir. I don't have to worry about the trub because we've already siphoned off the trub, but nonetheless I'm sure we will get a little settle out before we get it all into the bottles. Aroma is that cross between strawberry and citrus, and slightly acrid, I guess. pH will be interesting. And so we move on to bottle cleaning. This is my new bottle draining tray. It was pretty cheap and I thought I'd give it a try. It's a little bit more stable than the bottle tray and a little bit more easy to move around. Sometimes it's really easy to fit the bottling wand onto the bottling bucket. Other times, not quite so much. 24 bottles in total. This did take a little while to bottle and then cap, but at least I could do it from the comfort of a chair. Very relaxing. That rather looks like the yeast we added. Meanwhile, back at the keg, it's time to add some carbonation, or at least some CO2. Now, using my SodaStream bottle and the Kegland mini actuator regulator, which is an absolutely wonderful purchase. This is only the second time I've used it. And I'm also going to use it this time to do some burst carbonation. Hence, I'm going to set the CO2 level high, around 20 psi, for a couple of days before I then lower it back down to a more normal pressure, around 12 psi, to complete the carbonation process. We'll see how this goes. The final gravity is unchanged at 1.012, so that is great, but the interesting factor is going to be the level of acidity, because this drives the level of sourness that we have. A typical range for a sour beer is between 3 and 3.7, and we've come in perfectly within that range at 3.5. It's a few days later and we can bring that pressure down to 12 psi ahead of giving it a pour and a taste. Righty tighty on the flow control, taking the pressure off for a minute. Adjusting the pressure down just a little bit and tightening up that flow control valve, we seem to have found the perfect pour, ready for the tasting. Here we are then with the Philly Sour. Very, very orange colour. Just didn't get any of that strawberry colour in there. Don't know what happened there. It is a very cloudy colour, but you can see a little bit of clarity through there. I don't know if you can see that. It's not thick cloudy, it is just quite light cloudy. The head was phenomenal, absolutely white and foamy and lasted for ages while I was setting up. So that is amazing. Aroma, there is definitely that touch of orange aroma, citrus. Nothing really from the malt, it is all fruit onto the mouthfeel. So the mouthfeel is quite pleasant, it's quite sort of medium light, and you definitely get the orange flavour on the front. No malt particularly to it at all. But it's on the back you get the tart sour. My first sip, it was just a little bit of a shock, a little bit too much. But now on my second or third drink, it is like a citrus sour to it that, you know, just gives you, if you were sucking a lemon, I'm not sure exactly if this has landed in the right spot, but carbonation is absolutely wonderful. You can see the bubbles there coming through, and I didn't lose carbonation as I was dispensing. So that gives it a refreshing pop. This is a peculiar drink. We used lactose to give it a bit more body and mouthfeel, and I'm not sure we're getting that. Either I did that wrong or I just didn't use enough for the volume. It's just a slightly too simple taste. I am very much missing the fact that we didn't get the berry through, and the orange is a bit thin. Not sure about this one, but I don't think it comes down to the yeast. I think the yeast did a terrific job. What is interesting is I left the addition of fruit until quite late in the fermentation cycle, and it does say if you do that you get less lactic acid production and it becomes more about the attenuation, so you get a stronger drink at the end of the day. It doesn't come across as a strong drink, and it almost has a hint of pineapple to it. It definitely does have a dry finish on the palate, and I do remember the final gravity was quite low. Not a problem, but would definitely benefit from more flavour. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers, do like and subscribe. Thanks very much. Good health. Well, here we are a few days later, standing in the sunshine, and this has really come into its own. It is absolutely delicious. It has that lovely tart aftertaste. The orange comes through particularly strong, not too much on the strawberry. This is becoming a very quaffable drink. I look forward to seeing how the bottles turn out also. The bottles have had 2 weeks in a nice warm location, and I've now moved them to the garage where it's much cooler. Just before tasting though, I did move them to the fridge, so we now have a perfectly ready Philly sour to try. Yes, very good sign. Possible, slightly overcarbonated. Hello and welcome to the Philly Sour bottle carbonated version, and I do fear slightly overcarbonated based on the pour. I'm going to have to warn my friends. Lovely and hazy, lovely white frothy head. So as far as all of that is concerned, all is good. Aroma too. It's definitely a strong citrus aroma. And onto carbonation. You can't really see, but the bubbles in the bottle, the second I popped the top, did give that impression that it was slightly overcarbonated, and that is exactly what happened with the overflow when we popped the cap. However, in all of the respects, how does it taste? So, lovely tart taste. Doesn't seem quite as strong perhaps as the Keg Carbonated version, but absolutely delicious still. Nice long lingering sort of tingle on the tongue. This is very nice indeed. I do wonder whether I actually needed the cask conditioning yeast there at the very end. I think I'm going to have to be a little careful when I open these. A very nice end result though, and a highly recommended homebrew if you haven't tried one of these yourselves. I am definitely going to do another with stone fruits or dark fruits. Those seem to come out wonderfully in others I've researched. In the meantime though, thank you for watching. Happy homebrewing, good health, cheers. Let's check in on the Homebrew Masterplan, starting with the Iron Brew cider. The bad batch, this is still sitting in conditioning, failing to carbonate. I'm going to give it a couple more weeks and try again. Meanwhile, the really good news, the 50th Homebrew Punk IPA moved into secondary today. When I get back from holidays, that will be ready to drink. Moving on to videos, the How to Make a Malt Tea side project, that completed, as did the Iron Brew Good batch. That was fantastic, and we're just waiting for the bad batch to catch up so we can do a retrospective. Finally, our Philly Sour has been fantastic. We have just finished this video, so we're going to move that across into a retrospective in around 6 weeks' time. Do check out some of the other videos. Thanks for watching. Do like and subscribe. Cheers, everyone.